our home and native land, Toronto's newest pulp culture podcast, covering your favorite comics, collectibles, media, nerderific origin stories, and more. Hosted by your northern neighbor, Jowy Pangolinin. Here it is, nerdos and nerdettes, Comic Sync.
Nerdettes, it's Joey from Comics Inc. with the crew.
Kenya.
Anthony. Leonard. Shay.
Geoff.
Cyrille.
And we are talking Infinity Wars because the movie is coming out when, guys?
August.
April.
April.
It starts with an A.
It started with an A. I was close.
What are you, the Flash? Just
trying to. April 27th, 2018.
Very nice. So it's time to start looking out for those tickets. And we have Shane, who is our comic guru. And of course, all the way down the other side of that spectrum.
On the other end.
Yeah, we have Anthony, who wants to, of course, and for our viewers that want to get ready for this movie with reading recommendations and all the things that we need to talk about before the movie comes out, here's a podcast for you. So off to you, Anthony.
So if you're like me, you're a fan of this stuff, but you haven't gotten into the comics, the paper yet. And Shane is the one you go to find out if there's something in the comics and the movies. It's definitely in the comics before, and if you want to read up on it before the movie comes out, I want to know, where do I start with Infinity Stones, Infinity War? What's the Infinity about? Where do I start with this?
What's that about?
Right, well, I guess the fun thing is that the Infinity Stones weren't even called the Infinity Stones originally.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
Point taken.
I think they were called, if not the Infinity Gems, they were like the Soul Gems. And they first, like in the 1970s, when they first, and they introduced one gem, and it wasn't until the 80s that they decided to come out with their 6 stones. But in relation to the movie, you kind of want to start off with the original Infinity Gauntlet from the early 90s. I think it was 91 and 92 that it was released. That introduces you to all the big players, Thanos, Nebula, Death, Adam Warlock, which probably is what they're going to touch on in the movie. Right. I'm really interested if they're going to do Mistress Death, because that just brings into the whole cosmic sort of part of the universe. So, the Infinity Gauntlet is the first one you want to do. They did subsequent sequels to it. Mm-hmm. You don't really need to jump into that, but again, in relation to the movie, you may want to read Infinity, which came out maybe, I think, 3 years ago right now, but that introduces characters like Corvus Glaive and like all of Thanos' right-hand people that they're definitely using and you've seen them in the trailer, and I was surprised that they're even introducing them, because they're just mixing the whole Infinity mythos together.
That's what they do in the movie.
Right? It's like they're taking 20 years worth of storylines and like, you know what? One movie. So those it.
We don't have enough money, so yeah.
So one movie. Infinity Gauntlet from the early 90s and then Infinity from a few years ago are probably the 2 most important things I would read if you really want to have a taste of what could happen.
So for me and all the readers out there, we're not looking at like 20, 30, 50 things to read. We're looking at 2.
No. So the original Infinity Gauntlet, I believe, was 12 issues. It's probably less. I don't know. I'm not that hardcore. But,
says the guy who brought a box that he reads on a weekly basis. Sorry.
And then Infinity again was another story that was less than 10 issues. So even both of them are collected in trades. Yeah. They're currently in print. You won't have to bend over backwards to get them. Marvel is pretty good about even bringing out of print material back into print around the time of movies. So it's the jumping on point that I'm sure a lot of new fans will be looking for post.
Yeah, post movie, exactly. That's the thing. You guys can get ahead of it now instead of waiting for when the movie comes out, popularity spikes, maybe prices go up, who knows? You get into it now.
Oh yeah, the infamous movie price spike.
Yeah.
It is a thing and it's real. So.
Yeah, we just heard from Carlos in Gotham Central that like with Black Panther, before the movie came out, I think it was the number 1 comic that he was talking about. It was worth about definitely less than $100. The movie did so well in the box office, and now it's in like the 3s or the 500s. So
it definitely happened with Deadpool.
Yeah,
Deadpool's first appearance, and wasn't. I think it was maybe like a $30 comic.
Exactly. Like,
And when that movie hit, I think at its peak it hit 500.
Oh,
But it did come back down to earth because. Like,
so
supply
Shane,
and
do you
demand.
have these
Yeah.
copies, by the way?
I don't personally, but just as an example of how much things can fluctuate.
Mhm.
So there was a Canadian imprint called Dreamwave
Mhm.
in the early 2000s that got the Hasbro license and started doing Transformers comics.
Mhm.
And this was around the time of the first Michael Bay movie. So cover price, let's say at the time, was $4.50 Canadian.
Mhm.
By the time the first movie came out, that comic was about $100 and $150.
Ugh.
I own
That's-
two.
oh.
I own 2 copies of it, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is insane!" 5 years later,
Mhm.
that comic is now worth maybe $10.
Oh.
You still make $6 on it though.
Yeah.
Right, but it's honestly, and that's where I guess the whole resale market comes into it.
Yeah.
That if you personally own one of these copies and are trying to sell it, strike while the iron is hot.
Mhm.
Just before the movie comes out or just after, that's when you're probably going to want to sell it. But if you're a fan who wants to own these things, under no circumstances should you buy it around the time of the movie.
Yes.
Yeah, probably
You
now.
better-
Yeah.
Patience is a virtue. Do your due diligence.
Mhm.
There's going to be people that are going to try to rip you off on eBay
Yeah.
or Kijiji. They might try and say it's graded unless it's like actually sealed and you've seen the CGC
That's right.
copy in your face. Do
Mhm.
not pay for something
Yeah.
like that. It gets a little dicey when you
Mhm.
start getting into that. Like even someone who's trying to get the original copies of the Infinity Gauntlet.
Mhm.
There's going to be people charging an arm and a leg out there. Just make sure you're getting things like first prints because, and what some people don't know is the 1990s comics were really overprinted. It actually
Mhm.
almost killed the industry because the top selling comics back then were selling 2-3 million copies. Nowadays, the best selling comics, if you're lucky, are selling 300,000 or 400,000 copies a month.
Mhm.
So
That's
different.
because, like,
Yeah.
around the 90s, that's when comics started getting really popular, and then it was, like, a whole collector's item.
What
thing, right?
really messed up the game was the death of Superman. 'Cause
Yeah.
people were
Sorry,
buying-
guys. I know I keep going on about that, but that's
Yeah.
when I got into
Like
it.
that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
like Death of Superman. People were buying 10, 12 copies.
Lineups.
It was going to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
something that will pay for their kids going through college.
Yeah.
When you don't realize the sheer
like
amount of
$10
copies
right
that
now.
exist of that
Yeah.
storyline. So even though it's major and it was very important, it's not like Action Comics where there's only few of them that exist.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's only a few of them that are in decent condition.
Yeah.
So or
You
like,
can count it
or
in
like
your
Amazing
hands, probably.
Fantasy,
Yeah.
or like
I think
those issues. There's only like Amazing Fantasy 15 is like that price because
Mhm.
there's probably less than 100 in the world that are
Yeah.
in decent shape because people in the 60s, these kids were using them around their bikes. They were eating food over them. They weren't thinking.
And,
this was
and
gonna
keep
be
in
a
mind,
huge
back
hit.
in those
Yeah.
days, they didn't have the spray foam for insulation. And this was a conversation I had with Phil in Planet Hobby. And it was like, keep in mind, comic books, it was nothing back then. So people were using it for anything and everything. People would be using it as coasters, and they just didn't have value to it because they
Right.
just don't know.
It was the
Yeah.
same thing with like the hockey card and sports card.
That's
market.
right,
It's-
you know.
So that's why those things are worth something.
Hmm.
But anything that was made in the 80s or 90s, there's just a ton of them out in the market.
Yeah.
So be really careful about overpaying for anything
Mhm.
because if you're patient enough and just keep looking, you'll find it at a decent price.
Yeah.
And it won't be what Overstreet is charging. Although the Overstreet is pretty reasonable and it's the industry standard.
Hmm.
Like don't. If someone is trying to sell you on, oh, this is a great deal. I'll give you all the issues of this and like Infinity.
Don't
and
believe
Infinity
strangers,
Gauntlet,
kids.
Don't
Mm.
always.
Yeah.
Just really,
Yeah.
even if you need to go to a convention and try and
Yeah.
do comparison shopping that way because we have multiple vendors at the same place.
Hmm.
Good point.
Everyone
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
very,
Yeah.
very careful about. It's like even my own collection, I always try to fill in holes or get those major story arcs that I didn't get a chance to get when they first came out,
Mhm.
or it's just real. I don't want to jump through the hoops of online. Good conventions are a great place to try and acquire those sort
Yeah.
of products. So just material in general.
And so sorry, right now, I also want to know, those are books back then. Are there any books, runs going on right now?
Well, right now, Marvel is leading to a big Infinity event this summer.
Oh, the Prime, and then
So they Prime was a one-shot. Well, I should say it's Infinity Prime. And then right now they have Infinity Countdown. So they actually put books like Guardians of the Galaxy on hiatus, and so they could tell this story because the Guardians are a big part of it.
That's right.
But it is leading to Thanos again trying to assemble all the gems for whatever purposes we do not know.
Yes.
But for a number of years,
Just for his Pokemon collection or something.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's rock collection. Sorry, minerals.
Minerals.
Yeah, because the Infinity Gems have actually been missing for a while, and then when people started seeing promos with Wolverine holding one of the gems, everyone is what? Wolverine is dead. How does he have an Infinity Stone?
So many questions.
There's
So many questions, right? Yeah.
So right now they're actually in multiple comics. There's a short backstory at the very end talking about how Wolverine came back.
That's right.
Because it doesn't. Last time we saw him, he was encased in adamantium metal, just dead like a statue.
Yeah, I saw it, and he doesn't look as rough as I thought he would coming back from the dead.
He looks young and vibrant.
Exactly.
That's the nature of superheroes, though, right? They die, they come back, and they don't age.
Yeah,
that's old.
It's like one big Simpsons episode, you know. Nobody ages.
Getting all the Dragon Balls together, and bringing Krillin back to life.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, so this is one of you just Krillin. It was the entire planet.
Oh gosh, guys.
Just every Namek's gone. Like half the people on Earth
that's
are
a
gone.
whole other podcast there.
Thanks, Jen, for
and there's
recommending.
also some elements in the Infinity Wars movies, and a big part of that, as we were saying, were the stones. And I suppose we should talk about that because that's something that you're seeing it in the movies, and you're seeing this stone here.
If you went
What
to
are
MD,
they?
Yeah.
What are they? Let me tell you about that. Okay, I need you guys to help me out on that.
Okay.
So we got the Space Stone.
That's what you were going to see in. It's the Tesseract. They're calling it the Tesseract in the MCU right now. It's the blue one. It's the one that Tony Stark fell through because they shot a beam into the sky and they opened a portal.
Yeah, so it's the one that was in Captain America. It was in the Avengers.
Yeah.
It's the big blue square.
Yes.
And its power is power over space, so you can use it to travel and open portals and go across space. So that's basically its whole gig. Right now, we did see it in Thor Ragnarok as well. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, you will see a blue growing cube. It's in there too.
At some point.
And the next stone on the list?
We have the Mind Stone. That's the yellow one. It's the one that basically brought Vision and Jarvis into one to create this pseudo-Superman machine.
Yeah, and it first appeared on the scene in Loki's scepter in the Avengers, so that's what gave Loki the ability to mind control everybody around.
Oh yes, very handy. The one I know next is the Reality Stone was in Dark World, Thor: Dark World.
Yeah, so that was the Aether. So that was the thing that ended up in Jane Foster. It's that weird red kind of. It almost looked like mist. Like I don't know. It wasn't exactly a stone.
It wasn't really a stone.
But it was intangible. Like
it was like a
moving.
Yeah. But basically, that's the one that
Jane Foster got gypped, eh?
Yeah, she got infected with, and then Thor had to save her. And last we've heard of the Aether was, I believe, they gave it to the Collector for safekeeping because they thought that was a good idea. I don't know why.
Yeah, but
man's looked pretty shady.
Maybe he has a Galaxial locker we don't know about. I don't know.
I'm sure.
Do not touch.
I'm sure it's very safe. Next we have the Power Stone. That's the purple one. I'm going to go based on color in case, because I can say the Power Stone, but you're like, okay, but which one is that? So, the Power Stone's the purple one. You should have seen it.
It's reminding me of Gatorade. Like, nobody
Honestly,
really knows.
Yeah.
Nobody knows the flavors. They're just
all the blue Gatorade, please.
Yeah.
I don't know. If you guys remember that show Power Stone? The anime thing? Yeah, that's just what's coming up in my head is like, dinosaur people.
Yeah.
Now we're just throwing out too many.
Sorry, Blue Stone. Yeah, go ahead.
Purple Stone was in Guardians of the Galaxy. That's the one that Peter Quill got to hang on to.
This one personally is kind of ambiguous in terms of what it does. It has power. I feel like it can just
it has power.
It has power, yeah.
You can buy it in Canadian Tire for $14.99.
I think it's like a universal charger for your phone too.
Sure, yeah.
Next we have the Time Stone. That's the green one. You should have seen that one.
The Eye of Agamotto.
Exactly. That was in Doctor Strange. So